By morning, the most feared man in the city would realize the child inside her had already chosen a side. He didn't know that yet. He stepped into the open-air plaza the way storms enter cities. Quiet, inevitable, already calculated. The building behind him was glass and money and silence. People moved when he moved, not because he asked. But because the body learns danger before the mind explains it. He wasn't looking for anything, he was already late. He adjusted his cuff once, scanning reflections. Exits, habits. The city obeyed him because he never needed to raise his voice. And then his eyes caught on something that didn't fit, a cleaning cart. The slow squeak of a wheel, a woman pausing like gravity had suddenly doubled. She was bent slightly forward. One hand braced against the metal handle, the other pressed low on her abdomen. He noticed the shape before he recognized the face, pregnant. 7 months, maybe more. The body knew that shape. Even when the mind resisted it, he would have walked past her. He had walked past worse, but she lifted her head, and the world lost its rhythm. Her hair was darker now, pulled back without care. Welcome to Dark Crown Romance Channel. Please like, share and subscribe. The softness in her face had been replaced by something sharp and watchful, but the eyes were the same, the eyes that had once learned his moods before he spoke, the eyes that never looked away first. She didn't flinch, she didn't freeze. She watched him the way prey watches a trap it already understands. That was when his body betrayed him. His step faltered. Not enough for anyone else to notice, enough for him to feel it in his spine. This was the moment the past refused to stay buried. He had buried it. Carefully that he had signed papers, he had erased records, he had told himself survival required forgetting, he had believed that, he had needed to, she was supposed to be gone, she had run, and running meant vanishing, she was supposed to be somewhere quiet. Somewhere safe, somewhere far from his gravity. But here she was, pushing a cart in a building that answered to him, carrying a life that changed everything. She didn't speak, she didn't lower her eyes. She didn't call his name. That hurt more than any accusation ever could. Because it meant she had already decided who he was to her now. Nothing. His men slowed without being told. They felt the shift. They always did. When a man like him stops walking, the city holds its breath. He stared at her stomach before he could stop himself. The curve. The tension of skin stretched by inevitability. His mind reached for numbers, dates, timelines, and found none that allowed innocence. The child inside her had not been an accident. Not to him. Not to her. Not in a world like this. She turned the cart slightly, as if to continue working, as if he were just another shadow passing through. That was when he understood she wasn't hiding. She was standing where he would have to see her. She had placed herself in his path deliberately. That realization cost him something he didn't name yet, control. He took one step closer, not aggressive, not pleading. Just enough to make space tighten around them. She smelled the same. Not perfume. Clean soap and effort and restraint. She had learned how to exist without softness. He recognized that skill. He had taught it to others. Her hand tightened on the cart handle. Her other hand remained on her stomach, protective, unconscious. The city didn't matter anymore. People blurred. Sound thinned. The only thing that existed was the distance between them and the life pulsing silently inside her. He wanted to ask a question. He didn't. Because questions imply options. And options were already disappearing. They had seen each other. That was the irreversible change. There would be no unseeing. No forgetting. No returning to before. She met his eyes fully now. Not defiant. Not afraid. Resolved. That frightened him more than panic ever could. Because it meant she had already survived without him. And chosen to step back into his world anyway. He felt something dangerous rise in his chest. Not rage. Not desire. Not yet. Recognition. The kind that rearranges power without permission. He realized in that suspended moment that the child inside her had already chosen a side. Not his. Not hers. The side of truth. And truth had a way of tearing empires open. The plaza exhaled around them. Someone coughed. A door closed far away. His fingers curled once at his side, then stilled. He said nothing. She said nothing. And in that silence, the city learned something new. The man who controlled everything had just lost the one advantage he'd always trusted. Distance. She pushed the cart forward at last. The wheels squeaked again. She passed him close enough that fabric brushed fabric. Close enough that he could feel the heat of her body and the future pressing between them. She did not look back. He turned slowly, watching her go, watching the weight she carried, watching the line she had crossed by standing where he could not ignore her. And one question burned where certainty used to live. Why was she here instead of hiding? Silence was the most dangerous answer she could give him. She pushed the cart as if the weight inside her wasn't rewriting the balance of power with every step. He followed her, not close, not threatening. Just enough that escape became a thought and then died. She stopped beside a service corridor, parked the cart neatly, and finally turned to face him. No apology, no accusation, no softness. Her hand stayed calm. That was the first thing he noticed. People who were afraid always betrayed themselves with movement. She didn't beg, she didn't cry, she didn't explain, she didn't even ask why he was there. She looked at him the way one looks at weather that has already decided what it will destroy. He waited. He always did. When men rushed, they made mistakes. She said nothing. And in that silence, something inverted. The power he carried relied on reaction. Fear, lies, requests. She gave him none. He saw his men at the edges of the space, waiting for a signal they didn't understand yet. The plaza felt suddenly exposed. Too many eyes, too many variables. He made a decision without showing it. He lifted his hand once, low, subtle. The kind of gesture only trained people noticed. The guards moved immediately. They didn't rush, they didn't touch anyone. They simply changed positions. Doors closed quietly. Elevators stopped where they were, conversations thinned into nothing. The area emptied as if air itself had been drained. People didn't know why they were leaving. They just knew staying felt wronged. He didn't look away from her when it happened. He watched her watch the space change. She noticed. She always had. She exhaled slowly. That breath told him more than words ever could. She knew what he was. She had known then. She knew now, and she had come anyway. He spoke at last, not loudly, not cruelly. You shouldn't be here. Not a threat. Not a warning, a statement. She didn't answer. She reached down and adjusted the strap of her apron like this was any other day. He felt something twist. Not anger. Not yet. Moral tension. The kind that arrives when force would be easy and restraint becomes a choice. He stepped closer. This time she didn't move, she didn't shrink, she didn't shield herself. Her hand rested low again. Protective without dramatics. He followed her gaze to it. The child had shifted. He could see it in the way her body compensated, the way she stood slightly angled now. She had learned how to carry weight alone. He hated that thought more than he expected. He said her name once. It fell between them heavy and wrong. She flinched then. Not much, but enough. That was the only reaction she allowed herself, and it cost him. She lifted her chin. Don't. One word, flat, no emotion. He studied her face, searching for cracks. She gave him none. She had hardened in his absence. Not bitter, not cruel. Just finished with needing anything from him. That realization changed the rules. He turned his head slightly. Clear the rest of the floor. His men hesitated. This wasn't protocol. He repeated it once. They obeyed. People disappeared behind doors and corners until the space belonged to them alone. No witnesses. No pressure from outside morality. Just consequences waiting to be chosen. She broke the silence at last. You don't get to decide what I do anymore. Her voice was steady. Not loud. Not shaking. He felt the weight of that sentence settle where control used to be. She was right. And that frightened him more than rebellion ever could. Because control taken can be fought. Control surrendered becomes permanent. He stepped back half a pace. Not retreat. Positioning. Then why are you here? He didn't ask about the child. He didn't ask about survival. He asked the only question that mattered. She looked at him for a long second. And for the first time since he had seen her, something human crossed her face. Exhaustion. Not weakness. Truth. I didn't come back for you. That landed harder than any insult. She turned slightly, resting her back against the wall. Concrete was cold. He noticed. He always noticed comfort now that it was too late. I came back because hiding stops working eventually. Her eyes flicked to the sealed exits. And because some things only end when they're seen. He understood then that she wasn't asking for protection. She wasn't seeking mercy. She had stepped into his world because she had already decided the cost of staying outside it was higher. The power shifted again. Not to him, not to her, but to the truth standing between them. He realized something dangerous. She hadn't returned to be saved. She had returned to force a reckoning. And that meant the child inside her was not leverage. It was a declaration. He watched her straighten, ready to move again, ready to continue working like nothing had happened. And the question that followed him like a blade was sharper than any threat. What did she come back for if not protection? She had learned to breathe shallow when panic came, because deep breaths made the truth harder to hide. The child inside her shifted again, slow and heavy, a reminder that escape was no longer just distance but timing. She kept her eyes down as she moved through the corridor, replaying the night she left him over and over. The moment she realized staying meant disappearing piece by piece. She hadn't told him she was pregnant then. She hadn't even known for sure. She had only known that fear had started arriving before his footsteps did. That was why she ran. Not from violence, not from cruelty, but from certainty. The certainty that his world would choose before she ever could. She had crossed borders quietly, changed names, learned how to sleep lightly and move often. The pregnancy had complicated everything. She couldn't disappear the way she used to. She couldn't starve herself through days to avoid attention. She couldn't flatten her presence anymore. Her body announced itself now. She remembered the first time she felt the child move, alone in a rented room, hands pressed to her stomach, realizing the most dangerous thing she carried wasn't love or regret but proof. She had survived by becoming invisible. And now invisibility was impossible. She felt eyes on her before she saw them. Pause in footsteps, the delay in sound. Someone from his world noticed patterns the way he did. She knew that kind of attention. The guard didn't stare. He didn't react. He simply registered the curve of her body, the way she protected it unconsciously, the way her balance shifted. He looked away too quickly. That was worse. She finished her task and moved past him without meeting his eyes, but the damage was done. She felt it in her spine, the certainty settling cold and heavy. She wasn't alone in this secret anymore. In this city, pregnancy wasn't weakness. It was leverage. She had seen women disappear for less. She reached a restroom and locked herself inside, gripping the sink as nausea rose. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about exposure. She pressed a hand to her stomach, whispering nothing, because promises were dangerous. The door outside opened. She heard footsteps. She counted breaths. She told herself to stay calm. When she emerged, the guard was gone. But the silence he left behind screamed he would report it. He wouldn't embellish, that he wouldn't threaten. He would simply state facts. That was how destruction began. She walked faster now, heart pounding, the orientation of the building suddenly unfamiliar. She had memorized exits when she arrived. She had planned for everything except recognition. Her phone vibrated once in her pocket. She didn't need to check it to know what it meant, she did anyway. One line. No number. You should not have come back. Her throat closed. She deleted it immediately, as if that could erase the reach behind it. She understood then that the clock had started. Not labor. Not birth. Consequence. She leaned against the wall, grounding herself, letting the fear wash through instead of fighting it. The child moved again, stronger this time, as if responding to her pulse. She almost laughed at the timing. Of course this would be when everything shifted. She thought of him standing in the open space, watching her with eyes that calculated damage before emotion. She hadn't expected him to see her like this. She hadn't expected herself to survive long enough for it to matter. She had told herself the child didn't belong to him. Not in the ways that counted. Not in name. Not in claim. But cities like this didn't care about intention. They cared about ownership. She felt it now, the narrowing of options, the tightening of invisible hands. She had come back because hiding stopped working. She hadn't realized exposure could work faster than escape. She straightened, smoothing her uniform, preparing to step back into view. Because panic would betray her. And because fear, once noticed, became currency. She had survived by understanding that truth. She just hadn't expected it to turn against her this quickly. She stepped out, shoulders squared, heart racing, and walked straight into the next corridor, knowing somewhere nearby a message was already traveling up a chain she couldn't see. And as she moved, the question pressed harder than fear, heavier than the child she carried. Who else knows she's carrying his child? He didn't look at her when the realization settled. He looked past her, to the way the guard by the elevator adjusted his stance, to the pause in the assistant's breathing, to the fraction of a second where someone checked their phone and then didn't. That was how he worked. Not by demanding answers, but by watching who reacted to the question he never asked. She felt it immediately. The temperature in the space shifted. Not louder. Not faster. Quieter. People began to move with care, as if sound itself had. Wait, she stood still, hands folded low over her stomach, feeling suddenly exposed, not because he was looking at her but because he wasn't. He had learned long ago that fear revealed more when ignored. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to her. "Clear the floor," he said, voice even, almost bored. No explanation followed, none was needed. She watched as doors closed softly, as staff were redirected with polite urgency, as the world around her emptied without resistance. This wasn't panic. This was obedience. He didn't ask her where she'd been. He didn't ask who helped her. He didn't ask why she came back, because questions assumed uncertainty. And he was already certain. He walked slowly, deliberately, circling the space the way a predator studies terrain rather than prey. His eyes tracked reactions, not faces. One man avoided his gaze too carefully, another lingered too long at the edge of the room. A third smiled when he shouldn't have. The smiles disappeared first. She noticed because she was trained to. She had learned long ago that danger announced itself in small betrayals of instinct. He stopped near a glass wall, resting a hand against it lightly, as if testing pressure. "You were placed," he said at last. Not to her. To the room. The words landed with weight. She felt her chest tighten. He didn't say it as an accusation. He said it as a conclusion. There was no anger in his tone. That was worse. Angry men could be negotiated with. Certain men could not. She understood then that this wasn't about her decision to return. It was about someone else's decision to let him see her like this. To let him see what he had lost control of. To let him feel something unscripted. She felt the child shift again. A slow roll that made her swallow hard. He noticed that. Not with his eyes. With timing. He turned to her finally, gaze steady, unreadable. She braced for questions. They didn't come. "You didn't choose this building," he said calmly. "You didn't choose this time." She said nothing. Silence was safer now than truth. He nodded once, as if confirming data only he could see. "Someone wanted my attention," he continued. "And they chose the only thing that could guarantee it." Her fingers tightened together. He lifted his hand slightly, and two men moved without being summoned. One toward the elevator. One toward the corridor behind her. She realized then that the trap wasn't meant to kill him. It was meant to expose him. Emotionally. Externally. Publicly. Someone wanted to see what he would do when control failed. She felt cold at the thought, because that meant she wasn't the target. She was the trigger. When he stopped asking questions, people started disappearing. She felt it happen around her without seeing it. A chair scraped somewhere far away. Then silence, that a door closed too carefully, that a phone vibrated and then stopped. He didn't look in those directions. He didn't need to. The machine was already moving. He stepped closer to her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, familiar and unwelcome, stirring memories she had buried under survival. "You're shaking," he observed. Not with concern. With precision. "You're not afraid of me." It wasn't a question. She met his eyes then, just briefly. "I'm afraid of what you'll do," she said softly. That earned the smallest reaction. A tightening at the corner of his mouth. Not anger. Appreciation. Honesty mattered to him when nothing else did. He leaned in just enough that his voice dropped. "Then you understand the danger," he said. This wasn't about hurting you. Her heart pounded. It was about hurting you through me, he finished. He straightened, already withdrawing, already moving on. She felt suddenly irrelevant again, which was terrifying in its own way. Because whatever came next would happen around her. Not with her consent. She watched as one of his men returned, expression carefully neutral. He didn't speak out loud. He leaned in and whispered. He listened without changing expression. Then he nodded once. She felt it then. The betrayal settling into place like a locked door behind her. Someone close. Someone trusted. Someone who knew exactly where to put her so the wound would open in public. He looked back at her, gaze colder now, sharper. You were brought here so I would see you like this, he said. So I would remember what I let go. His eyes hardened. And so someone could watch what I'd do next. The silence after that felt heavy, expectant, as if the building itself was holding its breath. She realized then that the most dangerous thing she carried wasn't the child. It was his attention. And somewhere someone had planned for that. And as the first consequence of his certainty unfolded out of sight, only one question remained, sharp enough to cut through everything. Who wanted him emotionally exposed? She didn't answer him at first, not because she was afraid, but because this was the moment where telling the truth would collapse the last illusion he still had. He stood across from her now, no longer circling, no longer watching others. His focus had narrowed. And that scared her more than distance ever did. The room felt smaller, compressed by what he hadn't said yet. She finally spoke, voice steady, quieter than before. I didn't come back for you. The words landed wrong, sharp in the stillness. He didn't react. She kept going because stopping now would be worse. I didn't come back for safety either. That did it. His eyes shifted. Not anger, not hurt, calculation. She felt it then, the story tipping, the shape of it changing beneath her feet. This wasn't a reunion. This wasn't even confrontation. This was confession. She drew a slow breath. Hiding was worse, she said. Running made everything smaller. Every day was quieter, tighter. I was shrinking. She rested a hand unconsciously against her stomach, fingers spread as if bracing herself. And then there was him. She didn't need to say the word child. He already knew. He followed the movement, tracked it the way he tracked threats. He didn't interrupt. I realized something, she continued. If they wanted me gone, hiding wouldn't save me. It just made me easier to erase. Her eyes lifted to his then, defiant not in anger but in exhaustion. So I stopped running. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy with recalculation. He turned away, walking a few steps, then stopping back to her. She watched his shoulders rise and fall once. He wasn't angry. He was adjusting to a new reality. And that was far more dangerous. You think visibility protects you, he said slowly. No, she replied. I think it exposes everyone. That made him turn. That made him look at her fully. And in that moment something broke. Not between them, but in the story he had been telling himself. He had believed this was about reclaiming control, about repairing a wound, about deciding what to do with a past that had walked back into his life carrying consequences. He was wrong. This wasn't about the past. This was about the future. And the future had already been compromised. He moved closer again, stopping just short of her, gaze lowering not to her face but to the curve of her stomach. His jaw tightened. They already know, he said. It wasn't a question. She didn't deny it. They always did, she answered. From the moment I left. The air felt colder then, as if the building itself had understood what that meant. He straightened slowly, eyes distant now. Not because he didn't care but because he cared too much. The child was never invisible, he said quietly. No, she swallowed. Just unclaimed. That word did something to him. She saw it in the way his hand flexed at his side. This wasn't a love story anymore. This was strategy. He turned away again, already issuing quiet instructions into his phone. Short phrases, coded language. She caught fragments. Medical. Records. Locations. Clean. He wasn't comforting her. He was containing the problem. And she understood then that the problem wasn't the enemies outside. It was the life growing inside her. This was the moment the promise broke. The promise that this was about reconnection. The promise that there was still a choice untouched by power. This was no longer a story where love complicated danger. It was a story where danger redefined love. He ended the call and looked at her again. "From now on," he said, "everything changes." She didn't ask how. She already knew. He continued, "You are not exposed." Her heart lifted for half a second before he finished. "You are secured." The word landed heavy. She felt it settle around her like a locked door. This was no longer about whether he wanted her back. This was about whether he could afford to let her exist outside his reach. He stepped closer, close enough that his voice dropped, controlled and final. "The baby is already a target," he said. "Not because of who you are." His eyes hardened. "Because of who I am." That truth rearranged everything. She understood now why hiding had failed. It wasn't that she was hard to find. It was that she had always been visible through him. She felt the weight of his protection before it even arrived. Not as warmth. A shadow. This was no longer a reunion story. It was a containment story. And as he turned away to set the machinery fully in motion, one question pressed against her chest, sharp and unavoidable. Is protection about love or ownership? They didn't ask her when it happened. There was no conversation, no warning framed as concern. One moment she was sitting in a quiet room with too much space between her and the door. The next there were hands not touching her but guiding the world around her, chairs moving, voices lowering, a corridor appearing where there hadn't been one before. She felt it before she understood it. This wasn't transport, it was transfer. "Medical reasons," someone said softly, as if tone could turn control into care. She didn't argue, not because she agreed, but because she recognized the pattern. Arguments were for people who still believed refusal mattered. The car smelled like leather and restraint. The windows were tinted dark enough that the city became suggestion rather than place. She watched familiar streets blur into anonymity, realizing too late that landmarks only mattered if you were allowed to stop. She rested a hand on her stomach again. Instinctive now, the only territory that still answered to her. His voice came through the partition, calm, measured, already elsewhere. "You'll be monitored," he said. "Not watched." The distinction felt rehearsed. "Until when?" she asked. He didn't answer. That was the first lock clicking shut. The building they brought her to didn't look like a prison. It never did. Prisons announce themselves. This place hid behind glass and distance and the kind of silence money bought. She was led into rooms that anticipated her needs before she voiced them, furniture arranged to suggest comfort, not choice. When the door closed behind her, it did so without sound. She tested the handle once. Lightly, it didn't resist. It simply didn't respond. She sat on the edge of the bed, breath shallow, listening not for danger, but for options. None came. He entered later, alone, presence filling the room the way pressure filled lungs. He didn't sit. "This is temporary," he said. She looked up at him. "Everything you say sounds permanent." He didn't deny it. "It's for your health." She laughed then, a short, cracked sound that surprised them both. "You erased my phone," she said. "You replaced my name." He met her gaze. "I secured your identity." The word again, secured. "I didn't consent." He tilted his head slightly, as if considering something technical. "Consent is a luxury," he said. "It disappears when risk reaches a certain threshold." She stood slowly, anger threading through exhaustion. "You don't get to decide my thresholds." "I already did," he replied. And there it was. The cage wasn't the walls. It was the system humming quietly beneath them. She felt it in the way staff avoided her eyes, in the way schedules appeared without consultation, in the way her body was treated as asset and liability simultaneously. She was not imprisoned. She was managed. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "No one can reach you here." She shook her head. "You mean no one can reach me without going through you?" That earned a pause. Not guilt, not apology, assessment. "That's the point," he said. She realized then this safety wasn't meant to protect her from the world. It was meant to protect the world from reacting to her existence. She thought of the city outside, of the whispers already forming, of how quickly vulnerability became currency. Hiding her wasn't mercy. It was mitigation. Her name surfaced later in a report she wasn't meant to see. She caught it by accident, scrolling through a tablet left unattended. Old identifiers scrubbed. New aliases installed. Access restricted. She read it twice, hands trembling not from fear but from disbelief. She hadn't just been moved. She had been rewritten. He found her standing when he returned, tablet in hand. "Who paid for this?" she asked. He stopped. "Paid for what?" "Don't," she said sharply. "This level of erasure isn't concern. It's investment." The silence stretched, thickening. Depressed. "Someone funded this. Someone wanted me folded into your system so cleanly I couldn't step out even if I ran." His jaw tightened, the smallest tell. "You think I would sell your independence?" "I think someone already did," she said quietly. That landed. This time he didn't mask it. "There was a transfer," he admitted. "Before you came back." Her breath caught. "From who?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was colder. "From someone who believed owning you was safer than killing you." The false safety crystallized around her then. This wasn't refuge. It was escrow. She sat back down slowly, the weight of it pressing into her bones. She had stepped out of hiding into something worse. Visibility without autonomy. Protection without exit. She looked up at him, eyes steady despite the tremor beneath. "If I'm secured," she said, "then I'm already collateral." He didn't argue. And that was the most terrifying answer of all. He waited until the room was empty before he spoke, not empty of people, empty of noise. The kind of silence that followed orders already obeyed. She stood near the window, hands folded low, body angled away from him without turning her back. She had learned that posture in places where men decided outcomes before women finished sentences. "You came back knowing what I am," he said. She didn't turn. "I came back knowing what the world does to children without names." That landed harder than an accusation. He stepped closer, not touching, close enough that the air changed. She felt it along her spine. "You disappeared," he said. "Without permission." She laughed once, bitter. "I wasn't property yet." His breath stilled that word property. He didn't deny it. "You left carrying my blood," he said. "And you thought I wouldn't notice if it returned." She finally faced him. "I didn't come to be noticed. I came because hiding was killing us slower than staying." There it was, desire sharpened by resentment, pulled tight between them like wire. He wanted her, he hated that he did, he wanted control more. He reached out, then stopped inches from her shoulder. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" he asked. "You think I don't know you stand there daring me to choose between you and everything I built?" Her voice dropped. "I think you already chose." That cut deeper than anger. He turned away then, pacing once, contained fury precise rather than loud. "Do you know what they'll do when they learn?" he asked. "They'll measure your worth by how much pain it costs to take you." She swallowed. "They already are." He stopped. "That's why this ends now." She frowned. "Ends?" "The uncertainty," he said. "The waiting." He turned back to her, eyes hard, resolved. "I'll claim the child." The room tilted. She steadied herself. "And me." His jaw tightened. No, that word hit colder than rejection. "You don't get to own me to protect him," she said. "I don't need to," he replied. "They do." She understood then. This wasn't about love. This was about lines drawn so deep they bled. "If you claim him," she said slowly, "you make me a liability." "You already are," he said quietly. "But you'll be a living one." The announcement happened that night, no ceremony, no explanation. Just a sentence delivered through channels that didn't echo twice. The child was under his protection. Under his name. The city responded the way it always did. Not with surprise, with calculation. She watched from a distance, the news rolling across screens she wasn't meant to see, names spoken without hers attached. She felt erased and branded at the same time. Claiming the child was an act of war, someone murmured behind her. She didn't turn, she didn't need to. What does that make me? She asked, and no one answered. He came to her later, after the ripples had already started, after the first messages arrived coded as concern and threat. She stood rigid as he approached. You've locked me out, she said. Of my own child's future. He shook his head. I locked everyone else out. Including me. He looked at her then, really looked, something unguarded flickering through the control. If I claimed you, he said, they'd kill you to punish me. And now they'll watch you, he said. And hesitate. She laughed softly. You think that's mercy? No, he said. It's survival. She stepped closer, voice low. You don't get to decide what I survive. His hand lifted then, stopping just short of her face, knuckles tight. I already did, he said. The moment you came back. The distance between them burned, she felt it in her chest, in the space where love and fury overlapped. You don't love me, she said. He didn't lie. I don't trust love, he replied. I trust outcomes. She nodded slowly. Then listen to this outcome. She met his eyes, unflinching. Once the child is claimed, the mother becomes expendable. The word hung there. He didn't argue because they both knew it was true. He stepped back, putting space where heat had been. No one touches you, he said. As long as you stay where I can see you. Her voice was steady. And when I don't. His expression closed. Then you become the message. The power lock snapped into place. She felt it, not around her wrists but around her future. The city would never see her as neutral again. She wasn't protected, she was positioned. She rested a hand on her stomach, grounding herself. So tell me, she said softly. What happens to a woman once the child is claimed? He didn't answer. Because the city already had. She learned the rules quickly once the child was claimed. Stay quiet. Stay inside. Stay unseen. The rooms chosen for her were calm, expensive, designed to feel like care instead of containment. Windows that didn't open, doors that didn't lock from her side. Men who never spoke unless spoken to. She understood then that hiding wasn't safety. It was erasure. And erasure had never saved anyone like her. He found her standing by the mirror when he came in that night, one hand resting on her stomach, the other steadying herself against the marble counter. They've arranged transport, he said. Tonight. Private. No record. She didn't turn. Where? Anywhere you want, he replied. As long as it isn't here. She smiled without humor. You're sending me away like evidence. His jaw tightened. I'm keeping you alive. By making me disappear, she said. That's not living. That's waiting to be forgotten. He stepped closer. This is not a choice, he said quietly. It is protection. She faced him then, eyes sharp. No. This is fear disguised as mercy. He didn't deny it. You don't get to decide what kind of mother I become, she continued. Or what my child learns about power. Or about running. His voice dropped. If you stay visible, they'll test me. They already are. She took a breath, slow, grounding. I won't let my child grow up as a secret you hid to protect your reputation. This isn't about reputation, he snapped. It's about bodies. Then listen, she said evenly. I won't disappear. The silence that followed wasn't explosive, it was surgical. He studied her the way he studied maps before wars. If you stand beside me, he said, you become a target. She nodded. I already am. Not like this. Then this is where I choose to stand. He exhaled slowly. Visibility is a declaration in this world. Good, she replied. Then let them hear it. He left without another word. She didn't know if that was surrender or calculation. She found out an hour later when the black cars lined up outside the building. Not hidden. Not discreet, loud enough to be noticed. He didn't send her away, he brought her with him. The venue was a charity gala. Neutral ground. Cameras. Diplomats. Men who pretended they weren't afraid of him because fear looked bad in photographs. When she stepped out beside him, the air changed. Not because she was beautiful. Not because she was pregnant. Because she was unhidden, hand on his arm, head high, stomach unmistakable. The whisper started before the doors even opened. He felt it immediately. The shift. The recalibration. She felt it too, like standing on a wire strung over something hungry. Inside, conversation stalled. Eyes followed her, then dropped, then followed again. She was no longer invisible. She was a question no one wanted to ask out loud. He didn't touch her possessively. That would have made it obvious. Instead, he walked with her as if she belonged there, not claimed, not guarded, present. The first man approached with a smile too quick. "Congratulations," he said lightly, eyes flicking to her stomach. "I didn't realize. You weren't meant to," the boss replied, calm. The man laughed, uneasy, and moved on. She felt the danger before she understood it, not aimed at her, the space around her. The calculation. She was leverage now. Not hidden leverage. Visible leverage. She leaned toward him. "You've made them nervous," she murmured. "So have you," he replied. She met his gaze. "Who does this endanger more?" He didn't answer because he didn't know. The room filled. Music played. Applause broke out for speeches no one listened to. Every movement was measured. She noticed the way security shifted, not his, theirs. She noticed the way certain men avoided looking directly at her stomach. She noticed the way others stared too long. That was when she understood visibility wasn't just a risk. It was a provocation. She wasn't a woman anymore. She was a message. She squeezed his arm once, grounding herself. "They won't strike here," he said softly. "Not tonight. But soon." "Yes." A woman approached then. Elegant. Smiling too warmly. "You're brave," she said to her. "Or reckless." She returned the smile. "Sometimes they're the same." The woman's eyes hardened just slightly. "Children suffer for pride." She didn't flinch. "So do women who disappear." The woman stepped back, unsettled. He watched the exchange without interrupting. When they were alone again, he leaned in. "You crossed a line tonight," he said. "I crossed it on purpose." "You forced their hand." She nodded. "Good." The music swelled. Laughter returned, forced and brittle. She felt the baby move. A slow roll beneath her palm. She whispered, barely audible. "I won't hide you." He heard it anyway. His jaw tightened, not with anger, with something closer to fear. For the first time since she'd returned, he wasn't sure who he was protecting anymore. And somewhere beyond the lights and the false smiles, decisions were being made that would not be undone. Because visibility had done what disappearance never could. It had chosen a battlefield. The only question left was simple. Who would it cost more to protect, her, or the child she refused to make invisible? They never announced the retaliation. It didn't come with threats or warnings or raised voices. It arrived as absence. The man who stared too long at her stomach didn't return home that night. The woman who tested her with that smile canceled 3 meetings and then vanished from every guest list. The driver who followed them 3 blocks too far missed his next check. In this world, silence was confirmation. She learned that protection didn't roar. It erased. He never told her what he was doing. She knew anyway. You could feel it in the way the air shifted. The way guards stopped pretending to be invisible. The way conversations around them shortened, words clipped, exits calculated. She woke one morning to find the city quieter, not calmer, quieter. She found him in the study before dawn, jacket still on, hands clean, eyes unreadable. "Something happened," she said. He didn't look up. "Several things. Because of me." He paused, not long enough to lie. "Because of proximity," he said. "And because someone tested a boundary." She stepped closer. "And you answered." "Yes." The word landed heavier than any explanation. "How many?" she asked. He met her eyes then. "Enough." That was the moment she understood the cost wasn't theoretical. It was measured. She pressed a hand to her stomach, grounding herself. "You didn't ask me," she said quietly. "No," he replied. "Because asking would have changed nothing. It would have changed me." "You chose visibility," he said. "Visibility has consequences." She swallowed. "I didn't choose blood. Blood was chosen the moment you were made leverage." She turned away, heart pounding. She wanted to say stop. She wanted to say this isn't worth it. But the truth lodged in her throat. She didn't want to run anymore, and he knew it. He came up behind her, not touching. "They'll stop testing now," he said. "They understand." "At what price?" His voice lowered. At the price of certainty. The city understood certainty. It was safer than chaos. She didn't sleep much after that. Every sound carried weight. Every knock felt final. By the third day, the rumors stopped circulating. By the fourth, her name stopped being whispered. By the fifth, something worse happened. She was invited a dinner. Private. Old families. She didn't want to go. This is how it locks, he said. If you don't attend, they'll imagine weakness. And if I do, they'll understand alignment. The words settled in her chest like a verdict. The dinner was quiet. Polite. Too polite. She felt the shift when he placed his hand over hers at the table. Not possessive, deliberate, a signal. She saw it ripple outward. Eyes flicked. Shoulders stiffened. A woman leaned in and said softly, "So it's true." She met her gaze. "What is? Your family now." She didn't correct her. Neither did he. That was the moment the alignment became irreversible. Not because of paperwork, not because of vows, but because no one else questioned it. He stood at the end of the evening and spoke one sentence. "Anyone who touches what is mine touches me." He didn't look at her when he said it, but the room did. She felt it then. The lock clicked into place. Later, alone, she confronted him. "You didn't have to say it like that." "Yes," he replied. "I did. You used me as a boundary. I used the truth." "Is that what this is?" she asked. "Truth." He held her gaze. "You carry my child. That doesn't make me property." "No," he said. "It makes you untouchable." She laughed once, bitter. "At what cost?" "At the cost of ever being free again." The honesty stunned her more than any lie. "You knew," she whispered. "From the moment you stood beside me." "Yes. And you let it happen anyway. Because every other option ends worse." She sank into a chair, exhausted. "You're teaching them to fear us." "No," he corrected. "I'm teaching them to fear crossing us. There's a difference." "There is." She closed her eyes. "Can love survive this?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was lower. "Love doesn't survive cleanly in my world." "Then what does?" "Alignment," he said. "Protection. Permanence." She opened her eyes. "That's not love." "No," he agreed. "But it's how love stays alive here." She thought of the disappeared faces, the quiet streets, the baby shifting inside her. She thought of the life she'd refused to hide. "You spilled blood in our name," she said. He didn't deny it. "And now?" "Now," he said, "no one will ever touch you without touching me." She understood then. This wasn't rescue. It was consolidation. And the trail behind them wasn't just bodies. It was doors closing forever. She rested a hand on her stomach and asked the only question that mattered. "What happens to us when the child is born?" He looked at her, eyes dark and certain. "Then," he said, "there will be no difference between my enemies and yours." Morning arrived without ceremony. No sirens, no headlines, no bodies left where anyone could see them. The city woke up obedient. The kind of obedience that comes after something terrible has already been decided. She noticed it first in the quiet. The guards outside the residence had changed, shifts tighter, eyes sharper, no casual movement. The world had narrowed overnight. She stood by the window, one hand on her stomach, watching the street below. Cars moved again, people walked again. But no one lingered. Silence returned, but it weighed more than the noise. The night before had been surgical. He hadn't come to bed. She hadn't asked why. She already knew. The threat didn't end with a confrontation. It ended with absence. She found him in the private office just after sunrise. The smell of smoke hadn't fully cleared. A metal bin still warm, paper ash layered like snow. He didn't turn when she entered. "It's done," he said, not triumphant, not relieved, just final. "All of it?" she asked. "Yes." "The people? Gone? The records?" He nodded. "Burned." She looked at the bin again, the weight in her chest deepened. She stepped closer. "That was evidence," she said. "It was leverage," he corrected. "And leverage cuts both ways." She understood then what he'd destroyed, not enemies, not files. He had destroyed options. There would be no clean exit, no court, no relocation under neutral LAW, no future version of herself that didn't carry his shadow. You erased the last legal path, she said quietly. He met her eyes. I erased the path they would have used to take you from me. You erased the path I could have used to leave. Silence stretched. He didn't deny it. That hurt more than any argument. You chose for me, she said. I chose certainty, he replied. Certainty for who? For the child. She laughed once, hollow. You keep saying that like we're the same thing. You are, he said. Now. She turned away, gripping the edge of the desk until the world steadied. She remembered running. She remembered hiding the months of fear. The nights she counted kicks just to remind herself she hadn't failed yet. She had run to save her child, she had returned to save herself, and now she stood here, protected beyond question, freer than she had been in months, and more trapped than ever. What happens now? She asked. He stepped closer, stopping just short of touching. Now the city resets, he said. They'll pretend none of this happened. And us. We don't pretend. She faced him. Do you feel anything? She asked. About what you did? His answer came after a pause long enough to matter. I feel responsibility. That's not the same as regret. No. Do you regret it? He studied her face, the tired resolve, the fear she no longer tried to hide. If I had done nothing, he said, you would already be gone. She closed her eyes. That doesn't make this easier. I didn't do it to make it easy. You did it to make it permanent. Yes. The word settled like a lock. She sank into the chair across from him, suddenly exhausted. I thought love meant rescue, she said. I thought if I survived long enough I could choose something clean. He knelt in front of her, finally close enough that she could feel his presence. Clean doesn't exist here, he said softly. Only claimed or consumed. And I'm claimed. You are protected. Those aren't the same thing. They are in my world. She searched his face for apology. She didn't find it. What she found instead was something heavier. Commitment without illusion. He stood and turned back to the desk, picking up a single remaining document. She recognized it immediately. Her name, old name, legal jurisdiction. She rose halfway from the chair. You don't have to. The paper met flame. She froze. He watched it burn completely before dropping the ash into the bin. It's finished, he said. No one can take you. She swallowed. Including me. He didn't answer. She realized then that the most devastating thing wasn't what he'd done. It was that he believed he'd done right by her, and in this world, belief mattered more than consent. The city outside continued its quiet routine. Life resumed because fear had been fed. She rested both hands on her stomach and breathed. I didn't come back to be owned, she said. You came back because hiding was killing you, he replied. I made sure nothing else can. She looked at him, finally understanding the truth she'd been circling since the moment he froze at the sight of her pregnant body. This was never about forgiveness. This was never about reunion. This was about permanence. She ran to save her child. She returned to save herself. W.Y. mourning. She understood the truth. In his world, love doesn't rescue. It claims, and once claimed, it never lets go.